When you're preparing your vehicle to travel the rough roads of Australia's top end, I really like to focus on what happens below the hip height of your four-wheel drive. So I'm talking about suspension, I'm talking about tyres, and I'm also talking about fuel storage. Now, fuel is important for a number of reasons. Firstly, you want to carry more than you regularly would. You don't know that remote areas are going to be open for fuel, so you just want to make sure of that. So in my Amarok, what I've done is I've actually pulled out the main fuel tank, which is around about the 80 litre mark, and I've replaced it with a 140 litre Long Ranger tank. So that gives me an additional 60 litres of fuel to travel with. And when you're towing a trailer, that is very, very handy. But on top of that, these tanks are made pretty damn tough. So they're made out of aluminised steel, so they're not going to rust. They've also got a drain plug in them, which a lot of factory tanks don't actually have. So if I do get a bad dose of fuel, it's very easy for me just to pop the drain plug and empty that out and fill it up with a fresh batch of fuel. You can't do that with a lot of factory tanks. And when you are installing a long range tank, make sure that it doesn't diminish your ground clearance or your departure angle. Next up, you want to make sure that your suspension is up to the task. Firstly, we tend to carry far heavier loads than we would around town, so you want your springs to be set up to carry that load. But to carry the load is one thing, to control the load is another, and that is the job of the shock absorber. A shock absorber is essentially a heat pump. It turns that energy from the spring into heat and disperses it, and that helps control that spring's movement up and down. So you want your shock absorbers to really be up to the task in these sort of situations, and generally speaking, if you buy aftermarket, they will be bigger and more robust, and you want to make sure that those springs are well matched to the shock absorbers so that you're driving a very well tuned suspension system. And finally, the tyres. Where the rubber hits the track is where it all happens in four-wheel drive territory. We're constantly changing tyre pressures up and down, and that puts a lot of extra pressure on your tyre, particularly the sidewall. Now, I've gone for these Toyo open country mud terrain tyres, not just because of the tread on top, but because of the internal carcass construction of this tyre. It's a very tough tyre, but it also has a great blocky tread, which is extremely chip resistant, because if you go out onto these roads with an inferior tyre, it can really chip your tyres to shreds. So a good soft compound and the right tyre pressures will get you there every time. So there you go, folks. Make sure you look after your tyres, your suspension and your fuel. Keep that fuel stored nice and low in your vehicle so it doesn't impede your centre of gravity, and you'll have a great trip to the top end.